We're excited. Well, thank you for being here today. We're excited to tell you all a little bit more about the Journal of Extension. I'm going to hand this over to Lori Greiner. She is at Virginia Cooperative Extension at Virginia Tech and is our publications manager. And then we have Drew Griffin, who is at Clemson University as the director of Clemson Extension Publications. So Lori, I'm just going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Laura. I'm glad to be here today. I wanted to spend, well, first of all, I'd like to thank the academic and research learning community for letting us do this today. And I wanted to share a little bit about the Journal of Extension. I'm sure many of you are aware that ACE is involved with the Journal of Applied Communications. We basically run that journal. But we are also involved with the Journal of Extension. And I actually serve as the representative from ACE to the board that produces the Journal of Extension. And we meet every other month, I guess it is. And we work with Drew and the other staff at Clemson University Press to produce the journal. And So with that, I thought it would be a good opportunity to share with you what the journal is and how ACE members could get involved. And so today we have with us Drew Griffin. And as Laura said, he is the, what is your title? You are the director of Clemson Extension Publishing, which is part of Clemson University Press. And in his role, he acquires and publishes books, manuals, practical guides of interest to U.S. Extension professionals. Drew also serves as the current general editor, and I'm sure he's going to talk about that, to the Journal of Extension. And he regularly represents Joe and Clemson University Press in conversations like he is doing here today. And so I'd like to welcome Drew and turn it over to him. And the format today, Drew's going to spend a little bit of time telling us all about the Journal of Extension. And then following his presentation, we'll open it up for Q&A.
Thank you, Lori. I am not muted. Perfect. I'm glad to be invited to speak with the academic and research learning community here with ACE today. As Lori mentioned, I have meetings like this and do webinars and speak with extension systems and different organizations about the Journal of Extension, about the changes that we've made in the past 18 months, which have been quite significant. And about the direction that we hope the journal will be moving in the future, that we intend for it to be moving, as well as ways for you to get involved. The Journal of Extension is, and I will share my screen here. I've got a few slides. I realized about halfway through making this slide deck that I was going to be sharing it with folks who are expert professional communicators. So I ask you to judge me not particularly harshly. My PowerPoint skills are not wonderful, but we'll see what we can do here. So the title of this presentation is Do You Know Joe? It's a term or a little phrase that the director of our editorial committee has been using in publications for the past couple of years. And we found it's an effective way to engage individuals who may have heard of the Journal of Extension, may have published in the Journal of Extension. It's a journal with a long history, but they might not be quite up to date on exactly how it functions today. So the Journal of Extension was started in 1963, and it originated as a print journal, as you can imagine, and it originated as the flagship journal for extension professionals. Pretty much every extension-related organization has a journal that is more specific to their discipline. Lori mentioned the journal that ACE is most heavily involved with. The NAE 4-H YDP has the Journal of Youth Development. the agricultural societies have their own journals. Forestry has the Journal of Applied Forestry and the Journal of Forestry Research. There are any number of sort of more discipline specific journals. So what does Joe do? What niche does it fill? The Journal of Extension has always situated itself as a practical journal. It is a journal in which extension professionals, be they extension faculty or local agents, or specialists, can share the results of their research, their programming, things that they have done that have been particularly valuable or interesting that they think might be of use to other extension professionals in similar roles across the country. The journal itself is published since 1992, has been published as a Diamond Open Access publication. It is freely accessible. It is completely web-based, and it is supported by the US land-grant university system, meaning every land-grant university each year pays a reasonable fee to support the open access publication of the journal. We're also supported by a consortium of extension-associated organizations, including ACE. And that support allows us to publish Diamond Open Access. Diamond Open Access being the highest possible tier of open access in the publishing world. This means that not only do we not charge anyone to access the articles, we also don't charge authors any sort of article processing fees, any sort of article production fees, and we still maintain that high level of production quality that you would expect from a professional journal. All of our articles are still professionally copy edited, they're typeset, they're distributed via all the most contemporary mediums. They have DOIs assigned, and all of these elements do cost money, but because we are supported through this consortial system, we don't have to ask the authors for any of that money, which we feel is a necessary part of publishing an extension-related journal. Extension is a system that is reliant on service. It is mission-based. Clemson University Press is a mission-based publisher, and we hope to make sure that those values always align with the publications that we're putting out. So what's changed about Joe? Maybe you knew Joe 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Maybe you're working with faculty or agents that have published in Joe before, but they say, you know, the last time I published in Joe, it was 2014, and I had to use this submission checklist and then just send an email to the editor and send them my article. And it was a 4-year-long process, and it was really quite difficult, and I didn't love doing it. Well, I'm happy to share that we've changed a number of things. So the Journal of Extension moved to Clemson University Press in January of 2021. With that move, I came on board at Clemson to manage the journal, which I've been doing for the past, what is it now, 16, 17 months. But beyond bringing on a new general editor, we also completely changed a lot about the way the journal is published. If you are familiar with Joe, you'll know that previously there was a general editor, a single general editor, and they would handle the peer review, they would handle the copy editing, and then the article, when it was ready to be published, was passed on to a system that was hosted at Ohio State, and it was published essentially as a web page. It was a web page from which you could download a PDF, but it was not designed, it wasn't typeset, there was no real consistent branding. And we've aimed to modernize Joe both on the distribution side and also on the production side. So we introduced a new editorial model. This was important for Joe because historically the general editors of the Journal of Extension have been publishing professionals rather than extension professionals. That obviously puts us in a really difficult situation. I serve as the current general editor of Joe, which means I handle the day-to-day of getting things to the people they need to reach. But every day I read a new article and say, wow, I'm really glad I have people on whom I can rely, because if I was under that, if I was still practicing that old model of being the person who makes the decisions, there's just no way in a system like the extension system that one person can be an expert in blueberry irrigation and also in community development, right? The extension system is so broad that we just simply can't have the expertise to have one person make those decisions, even with the help of academic peer review. So in January of 2021, we adopted this new editorial model. We brought on 10 associate editors, all of whom are working extension professionals. They all have extension appointments, and they are all specialists in different aspects of extension practice. So when an article comes to us now, I desk review it. I make sure that it meets the basic standards for submission, but then it goes to one of those associate editors, and they manage the developmental process and the peer review process to ensure that we are publishing things that are cutting edge and rigorous research. As part of this transition, we also redesigned the journal. We created a bespoke template. We moved the journal to a new, easily navigable web platform that is powered by bpress Digital Commons. It allowed us to modernize the submission process, modernize the review process, make sure everything is happening in one easily accessible platform. It also provides some impact tracking value to authors, which I'll discuss a little bit later. If an article is accepted, we now use professional freelance copy editors and typesetters. I have a group of copy editors and typesetters that work only with the Journal of Extension, which means they have slowly developed some real expertise in dealing with extension-related topics. You know, my first copy editor for this journal, when I sent them their first batch of articles last February, I got the articles back and they had highlighted things like, you know, these authors keep saying 1862 and 1890. Are we just supposed to know what they mean? And I had to go back to them and say, well, yeah, we are. And by working with those same copy editors for, 16 months at this point, they've really developed a grasp not only of the journal's style, but also of common journal topics and acronyms and things that they can expect readers to know. We adopted a publish to print model. So rather than waiting for a specific publication date, be it every 2 months or every 3 months, whenever articles are finalized, they're published as soon as possible. We do still try to hold to about 20 to 25 articles per issue, but if you submit an article and it's ready in April, even though the next issue won't close until June, we're going to go ahead and put it up in April. This allows authors to see their articles in print as early as possible, which, given that many of our authors are publishing on time-sensitive topics, we want to make sure that that information is distributed as soon as we can. Similarly, we adopted a Creative Commons license, specifically a Creative Commons license that is non-commercial and what is called a share-alike license, which allows anyone not only to take an article and share it with their students, with their stakeholders, but also they can adapt it and adapt it freely. This is something that we had discussed for a while with the transition, but basically the decision came down to, we want individuals to be able to take an article off the website and, if needed, translate it or have it translated to be easily accessible to regional stakeholders. We want them to be able to cut out portions of it and use it in webinars like this, or share it in social media posts. And as long as they're providing attribution to the articles, we're pretty comfortable with stakeholders and extension professionals across the country and across the world using the information that we publish in as broad a fashion as they can. We're also assigning DOIs, which is a staple of contemporary publishing practice, but which allows articles to be discovered in a much broader fashion. When I came on board in January of last year, Clemson's DOI platform was getting about 100 to 150 hits via our DOIs per month. Now we're getting north of 1,500 hits on our DOIs per month, which is all an increase that we associate with Joe. So we're certainly seeing some broader discoverability as a result of that. It's just a basic standard of contemporary publishing. I mentioned the modern templates. This is what they look like. And we decided to go with two separate templates. Forgive the sort of clipping in the images. We decided to go with two separate templates to highlight the types of material that are published in Joe. I'll talk about our different types of articles in a moment, but we find that some authors use the Journal of Extension to publish really hard-hitting scientific or social scientific research, and some authors use the Journal of Extension to publish more targeted practical articles about programs, articles about tools. And we wanted to make sure that we had templates that differentiated between these two forms of research. So on the left, you see the template that we use with our feature articles and research in brief. It is a 2-column template that spans the entire page. And this aligns quite directly with the sorts of templates you'll find in major scientific journals, journals like Nature. The template on the right is a template that we use for our ideas at work, our tools of the trade, and our commentary pieces. These are shorter articles that are intended to be practical, and following best practices in most social science journals, we went with a 3/4 column that is a single column. This allows us a little bit more flexibility in presenting images, presenting tables, the sorts of things that you would expect to find with practical articles. So a quick run through the 5 types of articles we publish. Feature articles, which are articles that have word counts up to and including 5,000 words, are articles that present original research, so concepts, research findings, and implications that are of broad interest to U.S. Extension professionals, or of broad interest to Extension professionals working in one large general program area. So these are articles that anybody is going to get some benefit from, or anybody in one of these 5 major pillars that we've listed here will get some benefit from. Sample article here is Joseph Donaldson and Karen Frank's developmental evaluation for extension programs. This is an article that discusses how we're evaluating extension programs at the collegiate or university level. This is an article that we expect pretty much anybody working in the US Extension system would get at least some benefit from. Along the same lines, research in brief articles, which are a little shorter, up to 3,000 words, present articles that are original research, but limited to a particular segment of extension practice. We're still maintaining the same level of rigor. We're still maintaining the same expectation that we're publishing high quality research, but this is the type of article that may only target a specific segment of our readership. The sample article here is a 5-step stakeholder communication plan for more effective natural resources management. Of course, this is going to be very interesting to natural resources professionals, probably not as interesting to, say, fisheries professionals. Ideas at work articles, which run up to 2,000 words, are practical articles that are dedicated to describing novel ideas, programs, and new methods. And novel is the important word here. We don't want to publish in Ideas at Work about the 17th program that tried to establish community gardens in elementary schools. We want to publish Ideas at Work programs like the one here about using school pantry cook-offs to educate youth on food insecurity. This is a program that was successful. The authors wanted to share it because they think it's replicable in other states, in other systems, and they didn't have any information about anybody else who had done something specifically like this. Ideas at Work is where we go to share our practical program-related information that is novel. Tools of the Trade articles. This is a section that historically has been renamed many, many times. And it's been renamed many, many times because it's sort of our catch-all space. It is a catch-all space that deals with technologies, with books, techniques, technologies, tools, any sort of thing, for lack of a better word, that is useful to extension professionals. These don't have to be novel, they do have to be useful. So you'll see Mary Halbleib's article here, Improving Extension Curriculum Design Using Learner-Centered Templates. In this article, Mary had created a template for curriculum design, and she shared the template and a discussion of how to use the template. A tool, a discussion of how it's used, some sort of evidence that it has been used successfully in the past. Tools of the Trade is also where you'll find book reviews. We don't get a lot of book reviews these days. We have in the past, but Tools of the Trade is very much a practical category. It's also one of two categories that is not peer-reviewed in JOE. Tools of the Trade and commentary articles are only editorially reviewed because it's hard to ask folks to peer review a book review or peer review a tool review. The last category that we publish in is commentary articles. These are up to 1,500 words, and these are essentially opinion letters, thought-provoking, sometimes polemic, articles that talk about major concepts in the extension system. They can be specific to a particular discipline. They can be broader and speak to the extension system as a whole, but they're typically going to be framed as discussions. They're going to be intended to open debates. Commentary articles, at their best, are the sorts of articles that 10 people are going to read and then disagree about and have a panel at their next national conference to talk about the specifics of how exactly that topic might be operationalized or how that topic might influence extension programming. The sample here is Nicole Webster's demanding more. 4-H's diversity and inclusion efforts are simply not enough. As you can imagine from the title, that's an article that is sharing an opinion, but sharing an opinion that hopefully will spur further discussion and questioning. As part of the transition, we've also worked quite hard to quantify impact in a way that JOE has not done in previous years. We understand that impact metrics are important not only for things like program evaluation, but also for professional review, for promotion and tenure. Many of our authors are going to be looking for impact metrics to be able to support the idea that their programs are effective, which then can be used to argue for more funding, to argue for promotion, or in some cases, continued existence of programs. We have this infographic that we've recently made as part of our 60th anniversary marketing plan. I'll be happy to share this infographic if anybody would like it. It shares the fact that we, in the last year alone, published articles from authors in 34 states. As I mentioned earlier, we are Diamond Open Access. Our acceptance rate is sitting around 23%, which is very comfortable for a high quality refereed journal. You want an acceptance rate of anywhere between 19 and 25% most of the time, and we're well within that range. And we have been downloaded over 70,000 times, over 80,000 as of this morning, since we began publishing at Clemson. what that infographic doesn't tell you is that Joe is not only read in the United States. In fact, since January of 2021, articles in the Journal of Extension have been downloaded in 180 countries on all six of the 7 continents. I'm still waiting on somebody in Alaska to download, or in Antarctica to download one of our articles. I'm hopeful that at some point somebody at one of the research stations down there will take a moment to look at Joe. But we find that Journal of Extension articles, though they are primarily downloaded in the US, are making an impact across the globe as well. The system that allows me to pull these numbers is available to authors as well. Though I can see the results for all of our articles, of course, authors can see the results for their articles. And that system allows them to track how often their articles are viewed, where their articles are viewed, not only states and specific locations, but also the institutions that are associated with those locations. So if you're being downloaded in Gainesville, Florida, the system is able to figure out whether or not it's somebody in Gainesville or somebody at the University of Florida specifically, which can be helpful for coordinating with faculty there or specialists there about maybe cooperative programs or program licensure. If their articles are more popular in specific seasons, leading into semesters, leading into harvest seasons, leading into major conferences, that's something they can track. And also when their articles are being cited in other publications and who is citing them. This is something that's ramping up at the moment. About a month ago, we had 1 or 2 citations of recent Joe articles. Now I think we're up to 6. It's slowly going to ramp up. If we think about the fact that we've only been tracking these for 16 months, 16 months is shorter than the publication cycle for a lot of major journals. And so even if somebody read an article the day it came out and submitted their new article the next day, we're still just starting to see the impact of those citations. So we expect that to grow as time goes on. I've got a few examples of the sorts of things you can see in this dashboard. So this is the Journal of Extension over the course of the last year. You can see where our articles are being downloaded. As I said, primarily in the United States, but we're still seeing significant amounts of impact in Europe, in East Asia, in Australia, in South Africa, places where we don't think about the US Extension Service having a lot of reach, but apparently the research that we're doing is having some sort of impact with scholars and professionals in these areas. This is an example of the sorts of information we can pull on institutions. So you see the top picture there is the state institutions, the universities that have downloaded or engaged with Journal of Extension articles the most over the course of the past year. At the bottom there, we can separate out government institutions. So being able to say that your article is being read by folks at the USDA or the US Department of Agriculture or your state government organization, whatever that might be, is a good way to be able to argue that you're having an impact beyond the borders of the university system. This is one of my favorite examples of why this dashboard system might be useful. This is the download statistics or the map of download statistics for an article that was published about resource management in West Virginia. And you will notice that the vast majority of the downloads for this article are in California. I still don't know why. But if I was an author in West Virginia writing about resource management in West Virginia, and I found out that my article had been downloaded over 2,000 times in California, and I was able to dig down and see what institution it was being downloaded from, that might spur me to reach out to whoever thinks my article is that great in California so that I could figure out, are they using it in their classes? Are they using it in their programming? Can we maybe do some cooperative research? Can we maybe look and talk about using that system and figure out how they're using the system that I talked about or the research that I talked about in California, and how can we apply that maybe to other states or other regions? And if I'm in West Virginia and going up for promotion or tenure anytime soon, I imagine it's a lovely resume line to be able to go in and say, I wrote an article that is the most popular article in the Journal of Extension over the last year, and it's popular in California of all places. These sorts of metrics can be really interesting and helpful, both to authors and to us at the journal in thinking about how we're going to continue engaging stakeholders across the country and across the world. Finally, we do have a type of metrics that are powered by PlumX. These are the sorts of metrics where you can look at your citations, your mentions, your captures, your social media mentions. This particular set of articles, as you can see, doesn't have a whole lot of engagement on those with those metrics at the moment, but we're seeing them rise over time as the journal becomes more accessible and more discoverable. As more people know where to look, we're starting to see these metrics rise. So how can ACE members help in this process? How can ACE members contribute to the journal? How can the journal support you? You can submit articles. Members of ACE are professionals in the communication space, and there are any number of ways to talk about the way that you are operationalizing communication, the way that you are aiding extension systems in their communication planning. You have plenty of material that you could talk about that would be of interest to Joe readers and potentially helpful to not only people in similar positions at other universities or in other systems, but also to Joe authors who may not have ever thought about, I'm a local agent and I have a really successful program and I want to share it or distribute it or talk about it. Maybe it never crosses their mind to think, how can our communications professionals help me do that? Or how can our communications team work to distribute this information more broadly or share it in the most professional way possible? Publishing articles about those topics could be exceptionally valuable, and I think they would see quite an interested readership. You're also welcome to join our community of reviewers. We maintain a master reviewer list of close to 200 peer reviewers at this point, all of whom are extension professionals that can speak to a certain subset of topics. We do get articles from time to time on communication topics, and if ACE members start submitting more, we'll certainly need a broader community of peer reviewers that can speak to those topics. We'd love to have you on board as a reviewer. But beyond working specifically with the journal, we hope that communication professionals, communication teams at institutions will also start discussing Joe as an outlet for research and aiding authors in choosing the best topics and preparing manuscripts for submission. I got an email just the other day from an editor at a state extension system who said, one of our faculty has come to me and asked about preparing a manuscript for submission to Joe. Can you help me answer some questions about exactly what you need and what format you need it in? And I was heartened not only to see that faculty at that university were ready to submit to Joe, but also that they had approached part of their communication team and said, can you help me prepare this so that it has the best shot of being accepted? I think it's a necessary community to build between publishing organizations, communications professionals, and authors. Sometimes those categories overlap, but I think there's a real symbiotic relationship here in how we can help important research make its way to our community of readers, but also to the public as easily as possible. And then once articles are published, we would hope that folks in ACE would help authors quantify and magnify impact. We can ask authors to do things like place the direct link to their article on their faculty page. These are easy ways to increase the discoverability of their articles, but there are any number of ways, be it sharing things in weekly or monthly email lists, sharing articles about the Journal of Extension and the impact that the Journal of Extension has for local agents and extension faculty, and quite honestly, probably a lot of ways that y'all know that I don't. I'm a publishing professional. I'm not a communication professional, and so the suggestions that I can make to authors when they email me and ask, I've published an article, how can I distribute it more broadly? How can I get more people to read it? How can I get it into more people's hands? The answers that I can give them are pretty limited. Beyond, do you have a communication team? You might want to reach out to them. The answers that the folks in this webinar and the folks that make up ACE can give, I imagine, are much broader and much more comprehensive. And we would ask that you use your expertise, share your expertise to help magnify Joe and the research that we're publishing. That's the end of what I've got in terms of prepared remarks, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that y'all might have. I'm around for as long as questions are available, I suppose.
Thanks, Drew. Does anybody have any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask them directly to Drew.
I'll also pull up the chat here in case anybody wants to throw questions in the chat.
I will say, as I was listening, I learned a lot, Drew. As a new member to the board and just getting involved with the Joe board, this was very helpful for me to learn all these little details that I can share with people as well. A couple things that I did want to make mention of. One of the things that the board is looking to reinstate are, I don't remember what they were called originally, but we're hoping to get ambassadors from each institution that would help relay information back to your institutions. And I guess a while ago we had those. They were kind of like liaisons between the board and to the institutions, that they helped promote the journal at their institution. So we're hoping to reinstate that. So if that's another way that you might get involved with Joe as well, you can go to your extension director and say, hey, I hear they're looking for, they might be looking for an ambassador to Joe. I'd be happy to do that. Because as we were putting our thinking caps on, we were like, well, those communicators are probably some of the best people that can help us promote Joe at the local institutions. So that is yet another way that you can get involved with Joe.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
Sorry to step on you there a little bit. I was just going to say, I am on the committee that's finalizing the sort of responsibilities or what we're asking of those ambassadors, and we hope to have it finalized rather soon. So we should have, I understand people might be hesitant to jump up and say, I'd love to do that without knowing exactly what it involves or what the time commitment is. So we should have that information available shortly.
I'm sure there's a question out there. Somebody must have some burning issue that they would like. Ruth, do you have a question?
Of course, you know me. I, of course, have a question, and I'm sorry for being late, Drew. And so if you cover this, my apologies. But is there an editorial agenda created annually for the journal, or up to 18 months ahead or 2 years ahead or anything like that?
Can you elaborate on what exactly you're asking about?
Sure. So when we do our planning, basically, I would think, okay, if there's quarterly issues, there may be issues dedicated to a certain topic or a certain issue. Is that a part of the editorial strategy at all?
It's not, though it has been talked about. We want to make sure that we're leaving. we want to make sure that we're publishing articles in as timely a fashion as we can, because so many of the topics that we publish on are time sensitive, which means if we get in, especially after 2 years of pandemic, or a little more than 2 years of pandemic, if we get an article on COVID related policies or something that really needs to be published, the last thing we want to do is say, well, we've slated the winter issue for that, so you'll have to wait 6 months. So for our normal issues, I don't know that we're ever going to adopt topic-based or any sort of editorial schedule. That said, we have opened the possibility with EJI, the editorial board for the Journal of Extension, about doing topic issues or special issues that could be produced once a year or once every other year on specific topics. And if that were the case, they would come with specific calls for articles on those issues.
So this is a kind of a tangential question to follow-up question to that, and I'll give you the ability to plead the fifth on this if you want. So there's a little bit of tee up to this. One of the concerns I've had of working in extension for now 15 to 20 years or so is the disconnects between what I see happening at the national level and then in academic journals, et cetera. And I'm going, is there any discussion or opening? I'd love to see some alignment, even with organizations like ACE and our academic journals and institutional leadership nationally in some kind of issue identification, or like what's important that we should be doing and talking about. And again, if you'd address this, I apologize, but is that something that could be championed with Joe as well as with ACE? I mean, I think we need to bring this up with ACE too, but anyway, just a thought.
No, it's an important question. And Lori, I know you've only been on our board for a short time, but you have heard me talk about it, and the folks that are on the EJI board have heard me talk about it. My first and most persistent question since I came on board to work with Joe, because my background is not in extension. I have some really deep-held family connections to agriculture and to agricultural publishing, and I really love the work that extension does, but I am not academically an extension professional. And so when I came on board, my first question, and the question I'm still asking, is what are we? What is the Journal of Extension? Who are we serving? What are we publishing? Are we a science journal? Are we a social science journal? Are we a practical journal? Are we a research journal? And the answers to those questions have been pretty challenging to tease out. I've talked to a lot of folks who have worked with Joe for a long time, and about half the people I talk to say the Journal of Extension is the place I go with my hard-hitting research. It's really, the top journal in the extension space. And about half the people have said, well, I think of the Journal of Extension as the place I submit to when nobody else will take my work. And that it's really challenging to try and puzzle out a space when your community of readership and potential authors is so broadly divided. But I think that divide stems from the fact that extension as a whole is changing, and we don't exactly know where it's going yet. I do think that trying to tease out and create stronger connections with extension at the national level is something that I've been championing since I came on board. We have a position for a NIFA representative on our board, and it has not been filled in 3 years. And I really, really want to see us fill that role so that we have some input from the national level. We've reached out in the past couple of months to NIFA to see about getting the Journal of Extension listed on the official USDA website as the premier journal for extension publishing. Excuse me. We're trying to strengthen those ties between the Journal of Extension and the national system so that we can start thinking about, I'd love to be able to go to NIFA every year and say, give us a topic, give us one topic that is our focus for the year, and we'll do a special issue on it, and we'll put out a call, and we'll get people thinking about your topic, the topic that you want to focus on.
That's a really interesting concept. I mean, and I think that's what we're trying to get at, these synergies of where can we leverage our resources to best bring awareness and enlightenment to the industry, you know, so don't give up. Anyway,
yeah. Stacy just mentioned speaking with Lori Gula at USDA NIFA Communications. That's not who I've been talking to. We've been working through one of the director of West Virginia Extension has a personal contact at NIFA, and he's been working with her. But I will certainly reach out to Lori as well and see if we can make that happen, because I'd like to see that connection be a little bit more defined.
You know, I think there's, as we all know, there's a new energy to the communications and external relations kind of concept at NIFA. So I think that you might have some fertile ground there, Drew, especially if Lori can be an ambassador for you in that, which I know she can, and I'll do anything I can help. But I do think now is the time, the best opportunity to do anything like that than there has been in a long time. So my opinion, of course, but.
Perfect. I do want to go back. Ann Robinson put a question in the chat here and said, can you say a little more about the selection guidelines so that we can best advise researchers when they think, when we or they think their work might be appropriate for Joe? I can. Joe publishes research across a pretty broad spectrum, so it's hard to say exactly what we do publish. It's a little easier for me to say what I would prefer we not publish. And we have a history of publishing some of these things, and so I don't want to disparage them, but we're trying to move away from publishing things like standalone literature reviews. A literature review is part of a research process. I don't know that, or it very rarely stands as research in its own right. If you're doing something like a systematic review, there's some difference there. But if I got an article submission the other day that was a literature review, and the authors made it very clear in the submission that they had done a full research project, and they took all of their results and wrote an article and submitted it to another journal, and then submitted the literature review to Joe. And that's not particularly exciting to us. You know, anybody who's starting a research project is not going to find a literature review in a journal and go, okay, I'll just skip my lit review because I have this one. You know, everybody's going to have to tread the same ground and do the same work. So publishing a lit review is not super exciting. In a similar category, we get a lot of needs assessments. And needs assessments are sometimes very valuable tools. I know they are very valuable tools in program design, and I imagine they're valuable in communication strategy, but there's a difference between a needs assessment that targets a national or regional space and a needs assessment that is internal and used in support of a program. I'm fond of telling authors, if you have done a needs assessment about the needs of, Rhode Island's fisheries extension professionals, then by the time you finish that needs assessment, the 4 or 5 people in the world that need that information now have it because they're all on your team. And at that point, publishing that needs assessment, even if it represents research product that you've put a lot of time and effort into, publishing that needs assessment doesn't actually provide a benefit to our readership. Obviously, if you've done a needs assessment for extension professionals in the US or in the Southern region, maybe there's a little bit more space there for folks that would get something out of it. On the other side of that, the articles that I get that I'm really excited about are articles about successful programs. And when you write an article about a successful program, providing the statistical analysis to show how you know it was successful is useful, but also providing some information about how you think that program might be adapted, how you think that program might develop in the future, what you're excited about doing with that program as you move forward, is beneficial. Providing any information about, or any articles that we get about, cutting edge, interesting research. I think about one of my favorite articles that we published last year was an article about using drone mapping software to find disease in squash plants. They were using drones to survey fields to see if they could find specific diseases and infestations in squash plants to cut down on the necessity of human capital in doing that. I found that interesting and valuable, and the sort of thing that would spur potential education programs and potential outreach programs. I will say, given our particular moment, we have a really high bar for COVID-related articles right now. And the reason we have that high bar is because every extension system faced similar challenges due to the pandemic. So we've gotten probably 200 submissions in the past year and a half about, here's how I adapted X program to virtual. And we can't publish all 200 of them, and I don't know that we want to. So our bar for COVID-related adaptations has sort of fallen to, are you doing something that nobody else has done? Not, are you adapting a program that doesn't exist anywhere else, because everybody is, but are you adapting it in a way that nobody else has tried? Or does your article very specifically show that it will have some sort of impact or some sort of use beyond the pandemic space, beyond the space of 100% virtual education and outreach? If you found that, if you did a study and found that virtual education was stronger in X, Y, and Z categories, but in-person education was stronger in categories 1, 2, and 3, and here's how you're going to, combine them moving forward so that you can present a diversified program that you think will have a better ability to reach people. That's the sort of thing I'd like to see submitted. Of course, all of our feature articles, research and briefs, and ideas at works are peer reviewed. So we are relying on the expertise of our associate editors. We're relying on the expertise of our peer reviewers. They're really going to help us decide what does and does not warrant publication. We also are quite committed to developmental work. So if an author sends us something that is not quite there, but we think could be, our associate editors will do as many as 4 or 5 rounds of revisions with the authors trying to get the article to that space. Joe has historically been a place for authors that have not published a lot of research previously. Maybe they have been a local agent in a state where local agents are not required to publish, but they have a really successful program that they've been running for 10 years and they want to share it with people, but they're scared of the writing process. That's something that we're able to help with. I also always tell people, if you're writing and you are concerned because you may not be the most comfortable writer, you're not super comfortable with punctuation in academic articles, or you're not super comfortable with constructing a reference list that aligns with APA 7th edition formatting guidelines, those are the things we can fix. The things we can't fix are, do you have a good topic? Are you sharing it in an effective way? I don't know if that, answered your question as fully as I wish I could, but because we publish on so many topics, it's really hard to say, send us X, Y, and Z, and that's what we want.
Thanks, Drew. Does anybody else have any questions before we wrap things up? I will say that one of the things that Ruth and Drew and I had a call not too long ago, and we were brainstorming some ideas about how we could work with the Journal of Extension. And a couple things came out that maybe we could work together to provide some training for potential authors or something along those lines. And with our ACE conference coming up next year, that it will be in Asheville, from what I understand, that that Drew has said that he might be able to swing it so he could come and see us in person. So there might be an opportunity that we could partner, Joe and Jack could partner together and maybe do a session or two about writing or submitting to journals. We could come up with something, I'm sure. But I was excited when I heard that it was going to be close by to Virginia. I'm only 3 hours away. I don't know how far Drew is, probably about the same, maybe 2.5. So that would be a great opportunity for our two journals to maybe work together and provide some professional development. So we need to think about that as we go through the next few months. When we get together in Kansas City, we can maybe put our heads together and come up with some ideas and get things rolling there. He's also said that he'd be happy to do more online things as well. And there might be some opportunities for us to partner with NIFA or somebody else or some other institutions that could help us get this out to more people. So we're excited about those things and moving forward. I also want to reiterate that I do serve as the ACE's representative. So I represent the ACE members with the journal. So if you have questions, concerns, problems, heaven forbid there'll be a problem, but any of those types of things, you're more than willing to give me a call or send me a note, and I can help try to iron things out or find you the information that you need. So with that, I don't have any other questions. Do you have, how about you, Laura? Do you want to say anything as we wrap up here?
Well, I just wanted to thank you all for coming and presenting about the Journal of Extension. I think especially for us in applied communications, I work at a non-land grant, but the majority of my colleagues work at land grant universities, typically have extension appointments, and it's something that is very needed and useful for more of our agricultural communications faculty. But thank you so much for coming and presenting. I found the metrics so interesting and learning more about how we could leverage that in our tenure packets, but just learning where our research was. I thought that was really neat. So thank you guys. And I love the idea of a joint presentation at ACE. I'd be more than willing to help out with that next year too.
That's the sort of thing that we've done at other conferences. You know, I went to the NAE 4-H YDP conference in September of last year and partnered with the Journal of Youth Development there, and we found that it was very effective in sort of engaging folks. Thank you so much for inviting us. This was wonderful.
Hey, thanks, Drew. One question though, when Laura said that she didn't belong to an extension institution, do you have to be an extension professional to submit to the journal?
Not at all. Not at all. We make our submission guideline. Well, our submission guidelines are set up so that we publish articles that are of interest to U.S. extension professionals and deal directly with the U.S. cooperative extension system. We don't, look through your credentials before we review the article. So as long as you are publishing something that is of interest to the U.S. extension system, one of our authors that authored a feature article for us last year is now at a university in Chile, but was writing with a team about the U.S. extension system, and his article was accepted and published. So if you are publishing on topics that would be valuable to our readership, we want to hear from you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Drew. We will definitely be in touch about our upcoming conference next year. We'll try to get some ideas together and get you back so we can hear more from you and more about the journal. Again, thank the academic and research learning community for letting us do this today. And I hope you all have a good rest of the week. I guess we only have one more day left. That's the good part. And everybody take care and enjoy the summer. And I hope to see several of you at the conference coming up in June.
Thank you all so much.